What's up, losers? Today is a very special day. Something of a milestone, even. How so, you ask? Well, this is my 10th installment in the r/fatlogic series. It's been a lot of fun making these videos. And I'd like to thank everyone for watching them. And listening to me rant, haha. But anyway, that's enough sentimentality. Let's get on to today's posts.
Something that really irritates me is when stores charge more for plus-size clothing, under the guise that they are using more fabric. Well, you're also using more fabric for a size XL versus a size S. But those are the same size. So, your reasoning is BS. Just another extra price we pay for daring to be fat. Most of the time I refuse to shop at stores that do this. But sometimes it can't be avoided.
Size. Here we go again. You imply that the higher price is caused by fat phobia or anti-fatness, rather than the explanation that has been given around the higher costs associated with larger items of clothing. But when you get right down to it, nothing you've said here comes remotely close to proving this. The fact that they don't charge more for a size XL, relative to an S, doesn't prove that these items all cost the same amount to produce. If you think about it for even a second, there's no way that this could be the case. More fabric, more money to buy said fabric. It's almost too obvious to even point out. The reason that they might charge the same amount for an XL and an S, then, is based on a judgment that the prices are close enough to be allowed for, while preserving the desired profit margin. Ironically, this suggests that the real victims in all of this are the small people, because they have to pay the same price as their larger peers, despite the garments using less fabric, and they therefore foot some of the bill for the larger people's purchases, allowing for a flat rate to be charged for most sizes, despite the differences in production costs. But I suppose at a certain size this is no longer feasible. And people are expected to cover their own costs. And you know what? I'm glad, because what's the alternative? Having thin people pay even more still to cover the expenses of making clothing items orders of magnitude larger than their own. At that point, what you're asking for isn't equality. It's privilege.
There are only 3 surgeons in the United States who don't have a BMI requirement for their top surgery patients. Fat liberation and trans rights are inseparable fights.
First of all, I would be very cautious in approaching a surgical procedure that only 3 surgeons in the whole of the United States are willing to support. That's a lot of highly trained, qualified experts deeming that the surgery in question is dangerous, potentially damaging to quality of life, and/or unlikely to satisfy the patient. On top of the increased danger that obese patients face in surgery because of factors like anesthesia response, it may also be more difficult for the surgeon to reshape the body into a form that will ease the patient's dysphoria, if they are significantly above the weight range at which such procedures would ordinarily be conducted. I'm not going to pretend that I'm some surgical expert. The information I'm giving here is just what I was able to gather from a few Google searches and reading through the Reddit comments. But it seems like a pretty ridiculous assumption to me that all but 3 surgeons in the United States are just fat phobic. And this whole situation is nothing more than an attempt to keep fat trans people miserable. I also disagree with the idea that fat liberation and trans rights are inseparable. Like, most trans people aren't obese. The 2 issues would be separable for them. Surely, the cynic in me is saying that the only reason you're drawing this connection is because you know that people are more sympathetic to trans folks than fat liberationists, and you're trying to feed off the compassion that people feel for the trans community by hitching your wagon to them. But you guys wouldn't do that. Right?
Found out that the doc I saw about my back pain in college straight up used scare tactics to try to get me to have weight loss surgery. She told me being fat had done irreparable damage to my bones, and that she could see them degenerating, and wrote me a recommendation for a weight loss surgery. But guess what, y'all? I finally, after like 8 years, saw a new doctor, and after a set of x-rays she noticed that there were no such changes. My bones are fine, and she thinks it's likely that I have a severe case of arthritis. This could have been caught years ago. I'm so freaking mad.
Okay, but what do you think caused your arthritis in the first place? It's highly likely that your obesity contributed to you developing that condition. Which would mean that the first doctor was right, wouldn't it? I don't see how a doctor evaluating your physical condition, making predictions about the long-term effects that this condition could have, and advising you on what you might do to avoid facing these effects, is using scare tactics. That's just being a doctor, LMAO, that's the job. If someone comes in who smokes a pack a day, and the doctor tells them that continuing to do that may lead to lung cancer, and that they should try to quit smoking. Is that the doctor using scare tactics? No, it's just medical advice. The only reason you're interpreting it as scare tactics is because it's medical advice that you're emotionally unprepared for. Which brings me back to a question that I've asked before in some of my other videos. Why go to the doctor at all if you're not willing to hear what the doctor has to tell you? It just makes no sense to me. It's like they want to have the validation of being told by a doctor that they're fine, but they don't want to accept the doctor's genuine opinion. So I guess they just shop around until they can find a doctor who is more willing to indulge their fantasies. Seems pretty childish to me, but whatever.
Fun statistical fact: cows are about 300 times more likely to kill you than coyotes. Minor side note to this statistical fact: if it was common for people to keep several hundred coyotes on their property, and routinely chase them into a corral, and handle them, this statistic would be different. This is an example of a conditional probability, which is a concept that many struggle with, and for that reason, facts can be used to distort correlations without context. This happens a lot in healthcare. When it comes to people in larger bodies, fat is stigmatized as being a risk to one's health, without considering the societal conditions and systemic fat oppression that affect us in every aspect of our lives. It is true that many diseases are more commonly found in heavier people. However, that doesn't mean that the weight itself causes disease. Blaming fatness for heart disease is similar to blaming yellow teeth for lung cancer, rather than considering that smoking might play a role in both. And telling people they need to lose weight is a lot like telling someone with a cold to stop sneezing so much. It may not be possible, and won't make the cold go away. Hashtag styled seated. Hashtag slow fashion. Hashtag fat liberation. Hashtag ethical fashion. Hashtag fat at any angle. Hashtag thrifted fashion. Hashtag PS blogger. Hashtag weight stigma. Hashtag fat phobia. Hashtag PS fashion. Hashtag medical fat phobia. Hashtag medical bias.
Wow, that was infuriating to read. She starts off with this condescending spiel about statistics, then, sure enough, launches into the usual nonsense fat acceptance talking points. You're not as smart as you think you are. Not even close. You can't just dismiss all of the health problems associated with obesity by saying that they're all just caused by fat phobia. Not just because you don't have the evidence to back up this claim, but also because we understand the mechanics of how obesity can increase susceptibility to these conditions. It's not just some presumed link based on correlation. For example, fat people are more likely to have problems with their knees, because those knees have to support more weight than thin people's knees do. That's not fat phobia, it's just physics. The only way someone could believe that all of the health consequences of obesity are in fact the consequences of fat phobia, is through a religious commitment to the idea that fat can never be to blame for anything, and that all of society and the entire medical system is conspiring not just to ruin fat people's lives, but to consciously gaslight and mislead them at every turn, for no other reason than that they hate fatness. The only way someone could believe all of that is if they had hidden themselves away deep inside an impenetrable echo chamber, and given up on viewing the world through anything other than their own laughably skewed, self-protective, and ultimately delusional perspective. And unfortunately, from much of what I see online, this is exactly the kind of thinking that fat acceptance encourages. As a final note, no, being obese is not like having yellow teeth from smoking. It is like smoking. Both will diminish your quality of life in the long run. Both will put you at a heightened risk of premature death. And both are difficult, but certainly not impossible, to resolve, but not if you refuse to admit that there's a problem in the first place. Well, I got a little heated on that last one. Not gonna lie, the tone just got to me. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today. What do you think? Should clothing prices be different depending on what size you're buying? Is being obese the same as having a cold? Let me know in the comments. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, or I'll make you buy me a whole new wardrobe of plus-size clothes. Gasps. Ha ha. Anyway, catch you later.